Hello, everyone. Welcome to Higher Edification, a podcast featuring college presidents and other education leaders about the state of higher education and the challenges that we're all currently facing. Higher Edification is a production of Misericordia University, and I'm your host, Dan Myers. I'm the president of Misericordia University here in Pennsylvania. And I'm also known as President Dan on TikTok and many other social media channels. I hope you will look me up and join me and follow me. We try to do both fun and informative things on those platforms. Today, I am joined by John McKeegan, who is the president of Mount Aloysius College, also here in Pennsylvania, and we share another piece of our identity. Both Mount Aloysius and Misericordia are Mercy schools. There's 17 Mercy colleges in the United States, and we're very proud to be two of those. And we really share an approach toward education that we think is very powerful. Maybe we could start with that, John. First of all, well, just tell us how you came to be the president of Mount Aloysius. What's your pathway to the presidency? It's always interesting to hear how people got into these jobs.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. And it's a real pleasure to be on Higher Edification. I believe, in fact, that President Dan is an award-winning president for his use of social media. So this is a fantastic opportunity to have a chat. So we have this Pennsylvania connection, our two institutions. I am a Pennsylvanian by birth and upbringing, went to college in the Commonwealth of PA. Then law school was in the Midwest at Notre Dame. And from there, it was a launching pad to go out west, Horace Mann, go west, young man. And I was in Arizona for a little over a decade as an attorney, then met and married an Oregonian, and we decided to raise our family in Oregon, where again, started in private practice in the law, which grew into working for a small liberal arts college, Linfield University, and it took over my practice happily. And in about 2010, I was brought on board as general counsel and advisor to the president. In a series of progressions there, I became a vice president, then a vice president for advancement. And in 2019, I was contacted by a search group that said, there's this little Mercy college in tiny Crescent, PA, that we think you would love their mission. Why don't you take a look at it? And some proof that God has a real sense of humor. I accepted an offer for the presidency 1 week before COVID shut down the world in March of 2020. Showed up here in May of 2020. I think there were maybe 8 to 10 people on campus. It was a very interesting time, but like you guys as well, if you get through that era, you get some confidence that you can handle anything. So that's how I started in PA. My parents were both first generation college graduates. My dad thankfully went on and got a master's and doctorate, and he was a college professor. But I was born and raised with a very much a Western PA look at the world. That's where my parents had both grown up. And so it's great to be back here.
Yeah, very good, John. That's terrific. So what's it like to be, and this is for our viewers, because I know the answer to this question. What's it like to be the president of a small college like that these days? There's a lot of challenges in the higher education environment. And I'm wondering, sort of what your experience has been like. What have you found to be the biggest challenges at a school like Mount Aloysius?
So if I can break that into two questions, what's it like to be president? What's the biggest challenge? I'll bet, Dan, that this would resonate with you. I think what's it like to be a president? It's got to be an exercise of passion, of love. And those aren't words we might not always think of explicitly, certainly in our day-to-day meetings and certainly in our encounters. But you've got to have a real passion for our project, for the ability to have an impact on changing lives and changing the culture around us and inculcating certain values in addition to the academic excellence, the rigor that's required across higher education. Is, I think, Mercy institutions have a unique charisma. Here at the Mount, we are always trying to live mercy, justice, service, and hospitality. And that dovetails to the second part of your question. I think a challenge that we face in higher ed these days, and this is regardless of size, regardless of affiliation, whether it's independent, whether it's public, our culture, I really think, is suffering from a crisis of intolerance. We're not doing a very good job listening to each other and relating to one another and finding commonalities. And I think that's a massive challenge. I think our young people, I think our young students, but all students, because like Misericordia, I'm sure we have a number of non-traditional students. And I think all students these days come to us searching for a way to have a whole life and to be able to respond to people around them, not just people who are like them and not just people who think like them. But I think that we are part of the antidote to this crisis of intolerance where people just refuse to listen to divergent viewpoints, want people to fit a certain mode before they'll encounter them. That to me is at the heart of my passion for what we're about. The list of more business-like challenges, if you will, is very long, and they're the ones that also keep us up at night. Enrollment for our institutions is always vital. The value of what we offer. And I would contend that that going to Misericordia, going to Mount Aloysius are wonderful decisions for our students. The media, not surprisingly, I think, likes to sell bad news and likes to tell apocryphal stories. But the fact is, our students get wonderful educations at a very good value that allow them to go on to lives that make a real difference for others. So that's kind of the high level response to your two very good questions.
Well, let's go back to that intolerance issue, John. I think that's such an important issue right now. And, it's not just for higher education, but across society, we're seeing this kind of growing polarization and the inability, as you said, to listen to one another. And I'm just, super sensitive to it right now as we're coming into this presidential election when all of this really gets ramped up. What can we do as higher education institutions to try to combat some of that? How do we be a good player in that space to help us along?
Terrific question. And I think for us in mercy institutions, we can lean into our mercy heritage, which applies to everyone. And I think looking back at essentially the founder of the entire mercy system, Catherine McCauley, who certainly didn't only extend mercy and outreach to folks who fit a certain religious label or people who were at a certain socioeconomic demographic. She went out to try to make a difference to those who were in need. Going back to her faith and her passion, I think I think we need to be explicit that the master teacher, Jesus, said, if you only love those who love you, what good is there in that? And I think that's a challenge that college students respond to say, look, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to be kind or loving or tolerant to those you already like. But the challenge is, and the joy of life, frankly, is extending that beyond the known and trying to make a difference with every encounter you make. And I think it dovetails nicely with the focus of our institutions in helping people live transformed lives. And if that's the case, then they ought to be doing it for everybody they encounter. So I think we have those touchstones from our roots that should help us.
Well, I think that's right, John. And I mean, that's one of the beauties of being at a school that has a strong sense of mission. And it doesn't have to be the Mercy mission, but we love the Mercy mission. We share that, and we think that that's a wonderful font of all kinds of good things for education and for human development.
Yeah.
But any institution that has that strength of mission, and it's really part of what they're doing, it's really driving, can call on that in ways such as the way you're talking about to get people to think about this kind of stuff and actually act. Bring them to the table to have a discussion with people who are other, who aren't their natural
Right.
everyday people that agree with them.
The other thing I find helpful is to remind folks from a historical basis. This country is a proposition, right? It's an idea. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address made that explicit. But you hear all kinds of people from both sides of the spectrum saying we need to focus on this constitutional protection or this constitutional right. And I like to remind people, that Constitution is a product of compromise, and compromise among people who had very strongly divergent viewpoints, but they made it work. And I think that's part of what higher ed can offer is the perspective of a well-grounded view of history and a view that it's through compromise that some of the greatest forms of government came into being. So let's not be stringent in our viewpoint that there can only be one right answer.
Well, you're making a case for liberal arts education there, John, I think. It sounds like, because there's an appreciation of this kind of logic, of compromise, of history, all the things that we believe are so important for forming students who are going to be citizens of our society later on.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that was at the heart. We just revamped our general education curriculum, the curriculum that all students are anticipated and expected to complete as a part of their progression to their degree. And that's very much at the heart of it. The liberal arts are explicitly mentioned in our mission statement. I am almost sure that that's true at Misericordia. We cannot give up that part of the project. It's just absolutely vital. Now, you're kind of talking to the choir today. I was an English major undergrad, English literature. I wrote an honors thesis on how 3 plays, one by Yeats, one by Synge, and one by O'Casey, all caused, because of their overlap with the socio-political environment in Dublin at the time these plays debuted, all caused many riots within the famous Abbey Theatre. So it allowed an exploration of how do the arts speak to culture, speak to political movements. I think without that thrust, our culture will really suffer. I had a mentor along the way who used to talk about the Latin roots for the phrase of the liberal arts, and it meant a free mind, and not free in the sense of you can think whatever you want. No. I think you identified the key touchstones, but that a education grounded in the classic liberal arts allows you to think in a way to make you a member of a society that operates for the good of all.
Well, so John, you're a good example. So you said you're an English major, and you told us a little bit about that. But then you went on to law school, which is it's a professional school. It's a practical application. How do you look back and see how your English major served you as a lawyer or in law school? What's the connection between what you did as an undergraduate and then what you did in the next phases of your life?
So, very interesting question, Dan, because just yesterday, I'm a big no mere coincidence person. I was talking to somebody about the value of a writing class I took very early in my undergraduate days. And I'm quite humble enough to admit that this professor was known for, and did in fact, in my case, tear my writing to shreds. But I learned so much, and it was so fundamental to everything I did moving forward. So in law school, which involves like every professional degree, I think involves a training of the mind, a honing of the mind in particular skill sets or particular ways of approaching problems or issues. But this is true across every walk of life. You have to be a good communicator. For lawyers in particular, you have to be a very good writer. And the liberal art curriculum, which says you're going to be an effective communicator, you're going to be able to analyze and comprehend various methods of argument, and you're going to be able to build a case based on the record before you, the facts, the evidence. There was a great synthesis there. I will recall this very early in law school, that the approach is much different, and it should be, than an undergraduate. I took poli-sci classes as an undergrad, and you would read cases and you would write about these cases. The approach to the same case is much different in law school. But having had that breadth and depth of exposure to the liberal arts, I think makes one a better lawyer. I guess one could say, as evidence for that, I guess, posit Thomas Jefferson or Abraham Lincoln, and then say, I rest my case.
Right.
But I think you're really onto something. I often counsel students who are considering a career in the law, and they want to know, is there a major that I should take? And I say, no, there is not. You should pursue your passions, and you should make sure that whatever you pursue requires you to do a lot of writing, a lot of research, and a lot of thinking, because that's the key to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, even students that maybe they're not going on to a professional school like a law school or something, but they're going out in the workforce. If we go out and ask employers, what are the most critical skills that your new employees at that level, people coming with bachelor's degrees, have deficits in, that we can try to shore up with what we're doing at our colleges and universities? And what do they tell us, John? They tell us critical thinking, the ability to read a complex text and distill the important messages out, the ability to communicate through the written word and verbally. These are the things that they want our students to work on more. And where do you get those skills? You get them from these liberal arts majors and the core requirements that we require of all majors at our schools.
No, I agree. And the data's out there. Mount Aloysius, its largest major is in nursing. And we have fabulous success with those students. Our NCLEX pass rates are hovering at 100%, which is hard to beat. Mm-hmm. But here's what we hear from the healthcare systems. Yes, they love our nurses because of their technical competence and their expertise, but they really love the nurses because of the people that they are, and the empathy they bring to every human circumstance. And that, I think, is both a product of the core curriculum's focus on the liberal arts and our mercy approach, because otherwise you've missed something in terms of what college can mean to you, what it will mean to those you encounter. And in an interesting way, I think it goes to your first question, this crisis of intolerance, because yes, you've got a patient in front of you if you're a nurse, and you may say, well, I'm not really making a difference in culture, but in fact you are. when you treat that ill person in front of you, or the person getting ready for surgery, or the person recovering, when you treat them despite differences in communication, despite differences in outlook, when you treat them in a way that they are validated, that they are heard, and that you can explain to them in ways that make your advice understandable, I think, in fact, you are helping to build the nucleus of that person carrying forward, hey, I might be able to react and respond to somebody differently myself. So I get excited about it. You can tell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, no, I mean, and that's it, right? It's when the person is different from us in their political beliefs, in their background, their ethnicity, whatever it is, and we're still able to deliver that sense of caring to them. That's the eye opener for them, right?
Yes.
I really think that our students, we select them for that in a sense because that's part of how we advertise ourselves as mercy institutions. But when they come here, we reinforce that. We help them build that sense of being with others, and it's extremely powerful. We need so much more of that in our society right now. It's just awful to turn on the television or to be watching social media and see the way, almost without any kind of provocation, that people are attacking one another and like actively trying not to listen to one another.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, for example, I just thought of this. I mentioned Thomas Jefferson. We know now, in many respects, a deeply flawed human being, right? Mm-hmm. But he also, I think, had some ideas and expressed them forcefully. For example, the Declaration of Independence, and helped to create the idea of a government, the proposition that we're all created equal and have all rights. So I think the value of our project is to be able to say, yes, there are aspects or areas with which we fundamentally disagree, and or we would not allow in today's culture some of the activities or behavior that you engaged in are in fact not to be admired and not to be replicated. At the same time, where do we find commonality? Where can we find ways to help all of society? So that's part of lifelong learning as well, which we are all called to, I think. And you're right, we do self-select. I think it's remarkable in this country that I still think we're in the mid 30s in terms of, I think only 36, 37% of Americans have a 4-year degree. And so obviously we both have to agree that it would be better if more people had college degrees. But I think we're kind of around the periphery of why that's so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's guided maturation in a sense that is being provided, and really asking people to think more deeply about things that are going to impact them and others around them. And I think a question we need to be a little bit more explicit about, and you've said it, John, so I'm just rephrasing it, is how do we work together with someone who has some differences? How do we work together to do something good together, even though we don't agree about this? But there are other things we can work on. And really, and I this is kind of something I want to ask every person in Congress and in a legislative body. It's like, yeah, there's some differences between the R's and the D's, but the first question should be, how can we work together to make Pennsylvania better or make the United States better? That should be the first question, and the other things should be they could be there, but that they shouldn't be what it's all about. I mean, you're a legislator. you've got to care about the entity that you've been elected to forward and to protect, So,
Yes. Very well said, because I fear too often we run into a difficulty, or we run into something where we don't agree. And to use your phrase, the response isn't, how can we do something despite that to do good? The response these days is, you're canceled. And it may not be that explicit in the head of each of the people, but in fact, it's like, okay, you don't agree with me, I'm done. That's intolerance, right? That's saying, oh, you present differently than I do, right? Or you have different interests, you have different passions, you have a different view of the way our society ought to move forward. Okay, I'm canceling you. That creates its own, and I'm using this word purposely, vicious cycle. Although we do know from history that in the political arena, even comments about some of our founders were pretty salacious. So there is a certain level of that I think can be anticipated. That politics is a blood sport from time to time. Mm-hmm. But I think across the culture, this notion that, well, okay, if you're of that party and I'm of this party, and you start promoting whatever you think from that party's perspective, I'm going to cancel you. I don't get it. And particularly from our mercy heritage, it's just the antithesis of what we would expect. Responding to individual and community needs with quality programs of education means you don't get to cancel anybody. So I do think that I'm frankly given a lot of hope, tremendous hope, and confidence for our future based on the students that we get to educate and the students that graduate from our institutions. Sister Macaulay's famous prayer has a line in it that I used in my inauguration about a lively and unbounded confidence. And when I encounter the passion for our faculty and staff for our mission and the way they transmit to our students the value of approaching life from a mercy perspective, it does. We're talking about what might sound like a gloom and doom situation. I actually do try to remember that lively and unbounded confidence that we may be small pond, small rocks dropping, but the ripple effect can be profound.
Well, and we've got to keep calling for it, no matter what. I mean, this is important. And these things come and go in waves, polarization, gets better and worse. We're never going to have a Congress where everybody walks in and it's all love and we all agree on everything that we should do. But we can see right now we've gone too far in the critiquing the other side without engaging. I mean, This last Congress is the lowest number of bills passed, I think, in history. We're just not getting anything done because we're so, opposed to one another in this kind of battle for, rhetorical supremacy as opposed to getting something done together. And that's, and I hope that we will be able to, through the next generation coming up, I think they're getting sick of this stuff.
Yes.
And it would be great if we could, use that momentum in their sense of what they want to do with their lives to help build back toward a space of compromise and real dialogue.
Agreed. Absolutely.
I have a lot of enthusiasm and optimism about our institutions because I do see that students want this, and they might use different terms to describe it, but the mercy charisms that we're talking about are what they're interested in devoting their lives to and having be part of whatever professional thing they do. They also want these to be a part of the character of the place they work and the community that they're part of.
Yeah.
So, I think them continuing to call for it, and we challenge you out there, students, to keep challenging us along these lines, because that's where so much of our responsibility comes from, is reacting to you and what you want and how you are trying to develop as a human being.
Yes. Yeah. Well said. Well said. I think too, and I'm quite sure this is the case at Misericordia. Our students, I think this generation is getting a bad rap. Yeah, they use their smartphone technology too much. That's not earth-shattering. But at the same time, I think they are very empathetic people who care passionately about the good of the other. And I am frequently moved by their expressions of gratitude. They are grateful for the opportunity to be part of the higher education project. They're grateful for the opportunity to make a difference in other people's lives. Here at the Mount, we're almost 40% first gen and 40% Pell eligible. So higher education for many of our students was not a lifelong dream. It was not something that was familiar or known. And so I think the combination of that desire to make a difference for others with gratitude, you can change the world.
It's a powerful combination. It really is. It really is. And it's wonderful to see that in our students, and to be able to challenge them to develop it further. And through them, we're challenging ourselves to develop it further as well. I think, it's kind of, sometimes people say, oh, you learn more from the students than they learn from you. No, that's not exactly true. We're here to be an educational arm, but we can learn from them, and we certainly can learn together about the emerging world around us and how we can work together to do a better job. Sometimes we get a bad rap in higher education, but if you go to a school like ours and you ask someone who graduated, would they do it again? And would they go to the same school? I mean, almost all of them say, yes, I loved it. It was fantastic. It was this incredibly growthful experience for me.
Yes.
And so, there's all kinds of weird rhetoric out there about higher ed, and yet that it's not for everybody. We understand that. We don't necessarily think it's for everyone. We do think continuing to learn throughout your life is for everyone, but it doesn't have to be a bachelor's degree. But the people who do experience it with us, they do feel like they got something really powerful out of it. And that's incredibly gratifying to hear that kind of feedback, and know that as we're inviting more students into that environment, that we're providing something that's really worthwhile.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. John, one thing I do on this podcast is just try to get to know the presidents a little bit, and make sure people out there know that we're real people, and we're not just a figurehead sitting in an ivory tower office somewhere, but there's other parts of our lives. And I was wondering, John, we were just talking ahead of time and discovering a couple of our commonalities, but I was thinking about, you said you like to hike, and this is one of your releases, I guess, after a big weekend of activity on campus or something, that you will take off and hiking. Tell me about your hiking history.
So I do have to give credit to Teresa, my spouse. She's a product of the Pacific Northwest. Her dad was an engineer with the Forest Service, so she grew up out and about in nature, and she has gotten me into this hiking, and particularly this fall, the colors have just been tremendous in the Allegheny Mountains. And we had a very, very busy alumni and homecoming weekend. So on Sunday afternoon, after the final event of the day on Sunday, which was a very nice brunch, we decided we'd try this new trail. And it was on an old portage. And applying to liberal arts, I should have done a little bit more review of the history. saw some photographs and I thought it looked beautiful. Well, it turned out to be 4.5 miles every single step uphill. And at a certain point, I said, do you think there might just be a downgrade for a little bit? And it's kind of proof that God has a sense of humor. There was not. It was uphill. But that's, so that was a bit of, wow, the unexpected. Wow, not maybe what we thought we were going to encounter, but more than made up for by the incredible views, the chance to get out in nature, which we know is good for us holistically. The other thing we do a musical theater production every fall and every spring, and as you know from the earlier comment, I'm kind of interested in theater, and I did some singing and acting as an undergrad and throughout high school. And so the director, he's wise, keep the president happy. So I have been given various cameo appearances in these shows. So I'm actually rehearsing this evening because we go. The curtain comes up tomorrow night for the premiere of the fall production. So I have a very, very small part, but I have to learn a few lines, and it's kind of fun to get blocking instructions from the director. And in that mode, I'm just another one of the cast, right?
Yeah.
And
what is the show, John?
So we are doing Charlotte's Web.
Oh, okay.
This fall. What we try to do with the fall show. So tomorrow there will be 2 matinee performances where we'll probably we bring in busloads of elementary school kids, because we want to get them onto a college campus, and I talk to them before the show starts, and I welcome them as members of the class of 2034, or 2035, and we talk to them a bit about the value of the arts. Like, you're about to watch a show, you get to use your imagination, you get to be creative, you get to take on another person or another character, and why is that good for you? And you get to hear music. So the fall play tends to be one that works both for adult audiences and for the younger people. So it's a lot of fun. An example of typecasting, I am the president of the fair.
Yeah. Very good. And you have lines. That's
Yes.
That's good. So
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
I haven't been asked to be in a production here yet. Probably because they're fully aware of my overacting on TikTok. But
I have a funny feeling. I have a funny feeling that may just be something we share. Last spring we did the Drowsy Chaperone, and I got to play a building superintendent who comes in and discovers that the main character loves musical theater, which this rough and tumble New York building supervisor also loves. And I couldn't resist ad-libbing from Hamilton.
Oh,
I think the director wanted to say okay, but he let it go.
Well, we have some new music ensembles up here at Misericordia, and I'm playing the trumpet in one of them, and which is an instrument I have not played since the 4th grade.
Wow.
And so it's been super challenging, but really fun.
Because you're a super talented guitarist, right?
Well, that's high praise for my guitar playing, John. But yeah, I do play guitar in a band and things. But
how is the trumpet going?
It's tough. I mean, just not having that muscle tone in my lips anymore. It's been a lot to work it back up. And some of the other students they give me the side eye when I'm playing sometimes. So.
I played the tuba and sousaphone in high school. I can still remember the fingerings for the B flat scale, but I am absolutely sure I have no embouchure whatsoever. It would be beyond comical if I tried to play.
Well, this is one of the beauties of being in a smaller school like this is that you have opportunities to do things like that, like being a play or being an instrumental ensemble, and I really love it. I mean, these schools are communities, and you're really adopting a lifestyle as a really central member of that community, and so it's really. It lets you, exercise different muscles in your brain and your soul by doing these kinds of things.
And you know what? You're absolutely right. The breadth of disciplines among the cast and crew of this show, it covers the entire gamut of what we offer here. And we had the opportunity for them to encounter our board of trustees a couple weeks ago. And what they talked about was exactly what you just mentioned, and the sense of community, the sense of family, and a sense of place, apart from their day-to-day encounters, that really makes their lives here resonate with joy. So, yeah.
That's good stuff. We did a reading of a modern translation of Beowulf about 2 weeks ago out here. And so I volunteered to be one of the readers. And of course, this, very strategically assigned me a passage that had curse words in it so they could hear me. Those kinds of things are a lot of fun. They connect us all together in really wonderful. Well, John, it's been really great talking to you today on this podcast, and some really important topics that we all need to be thinking about harder as we're going through our work and designing and executing these experiences for students at our university. So I want to say thank you not only for being here, but for your leadership of one of these Mercy schools. And I think it's a powerful experience, and it's a powerful thing that we're trying to do with these higher ed environments. So thank you for all of that, John. It's been wonderful to be with you.
Dan, thank you. It's been terrific to be on Higher Edification.
Thank you, John. Well, everybody out there, thank you for joining us today. We've been speaking with John McKeegan, who's the president of Mount Aloysius College, and we've had a wonderful conversation. And we hope that you'll join us for the next installment of Higher Edification, which is a production of Misericordia University. Until then, take care and keep living your mission out there, folks.